The following transcript contains content that may not be suitable for some viewers. You have been warned. This ain't my first rodeo, so to speak. In fact, just last week I had to put down a mama mule deer. She had quite recently given birth to two beautiful little fawns just off of one of the hiking trails when we found her. I guess found isn't really the right word for it. Two of our regular climbers, a couple in their mid-60s, in pretty good shape, both of them, stopped by the station early Tuesday morning to let us know that they heard some sort of screaming over by Bison's Brook. Come to find out, it was our mama. Pretty thing. We had seen her around before, but never like this. Now, if her broken hind leg wasn't bad enough, it appeared that she also had some kind of internal bleeding, evident by the pinkish-red rash on her tummy. Walt suggested we carry her all the way back, but even though I'm no veterinarian, I knew that it'd probably do her more harm than good. Suffice it to say, we chose the humane method. Buried her on the spot, which brought me back to my 12-year-old days when Lilith, our pet tabby of 12 years, kicked the bucket in the backyard. And while I ain't no veterinarian myself, both then and now, I sure do know a couple. That's where the fawns went, and from what I hear, they're doing A-OK. I should pause here and explain the nature of this report. Usually, I ain't this informal, but given the circumstances, as you'll soon see, I'd say it's well warranted. This one's different. Now, typically we make these public record 'cause of the FOIA, which normally I have no problem with. However, given what I'm about to disclose, I'd like to petition to have this statement expunged, or however you put it. Not for the sake of myself, or really anybody else, but for the church. That said, I know I'm asking for a tall order here, and 'cause of that, I'll be sparse with the details, just in case of any wandering eyes that read this, or any wandering legs that try to come find the place. I'd rather they didn't. Sure, I suppose a keen reader could probably determine, based on my mention of the mule deer alone, the general region of where I'm writing this from. Or, when I get to the part about the place being in a clearing of silver spruce, which state or even county. That said, just 'cause they'd rule out where it couldn't be, doesn't mean they know where it could, and that even if they tried, it'd be damn near impossible. Unfortunately, just by saying that, any curious souls, kindred to that of my own, would see this very report as a challenge and read it like a treasure map. To them, I say this: there ain't no treasure. All you'd find where the X marks the spot is a stack of rotting logs in the middle of the woods. The church, by the time you or I'd ever find it again, would be dead and gone. The elements have taken their toll already, and the last thing I think anyone would want would be for some group of hooligans to go vandalize the place, or, even worse, God forbid, for some so-called ghost catcher, paranormal investigator types to tear it to shambles. Just let the poor thing rest in peace. See, I believe that places have spirits, so to speak, not like the critters do or as we do, not souls, but spirits, essences. Growing up, my pappy used to live with us. Well, beneath us, actually, before he went to be beneath all of us. He had the whole basement to himself, which, at the time, when I was a little kid, felt like the coolest underground cavern that side of the Mississippi. Now I'd probably guess it was only some 500 square feet or so. Regardless, it was a space that, through and through, was my grandfather's. He had old war medals on the tables and big old flags across the wall, a nice easy chair that'd click when he rocked in it, and one of those boxy TVs always tuned to the Channel 2 news, and just a little too loud so that we'd all hear it upstairs. That was the way he was, and when he died, I really missed that sound. I missed the whole basement. Of course, an estate sale doesn't bulldoze the walls, but it can sap away some of the spirit of a place. Pappy's basement became just a basement, and never quite felt the same since, despite having all the same memories stashed between the same walls and floor and ceiling. Cause of that, I stopped playing down there as I always had, and one day my mama asked me about it. Even then I knew. That basement died when my grandpappy did. Same thing happened to the house itself some years later. Daddy died and Mama wanted to scale down. We didn't need 3 stories any longer, so why pay for it? Even though the mortgage was paid off, the upkeep would have never been. And seeing as I was heading off to join the service, Mama couldn't have done it all herself. I still remember the day I went back there. It was a few months after the property had sold, all thanks to some realtor lady with a really nice suit and bobbed hair. Mama had left something in the upstairs attic, an old keepsake box of sorts, and asked if I'd take the drive before I got deployed come Christmas. I agreed and made the trek south. When I got there and met the new owners, kind enough folks, I suddenly felt something I hadn't in over 10 years. That same creeping feeling I had after Pappy died. Except, instead of the house being outright dead, as the basement had been, it was taxidermized, stuffed with something, or someone's, new. I suppose to them it wasn't so, though. To them, the house was reborn into a new family. But to me, it was propped up and looking nowhere with glassy eyeballs. Or maybe that's how it always was after the original owners left it. Guess I'll never know. That feeling would come and go every now and again, to varying degrees. For instance, when I was shipped overseas during Nam, we occupied a place in Laos. The name of the specific city escapes me today, but the feeling it had never will. It was a feeling as tangible as mist, the feeling that the place was dead right from the start, as if we were moving into a corpse. Then, again, it happened when I got back to the States. Stayed in a place near Salt Lake City for a time, when I was getting back on my feet. An old hotel. Hotels are strange sorts of places. Their spirits are curious too, I guess you could say. Kindred to mine. 'Cause nobody truly settles there for long. Their essences are ever-changing, and you can feel it if you try. Lord knows I did. Churches, on the other hand, are places of deep connection, focused energy. Sort of like houses turned to homes. They absorb the spirit put into them, like aging milk that takes the flavor of the meatloaf left next to it in the fridge. And though I haven't been inside one in quite a while, I don't think anyone needs me to explain what I mean. I don't have to. You can just feel it. I know the couple certainly did. No, not the fit one in their 60s. This was a young one, probably in their 30s, skin salty with sweat, eyes wide, faces white, and hair on end. If I could have gotten a word in, I'd have asked them if they'd seen a ghost. But they answered that one for me. Apparently, while on a closed-off trail that they shouldn't have been on. Figures as much, young people being the most curious of souls. They had spotted a building off in the distance, a good 2 or 3 miles or so into their hike. It was a church, according to them, complete with a bell and steeple and all the fixings you might find in one built before the turn of the century. I supposed such a discovery wouldn't have been beyond the realm of possibilities and, at least for the time, ruled out their hysterics as being some kind of practical joke. I then started to ask them what had spooked them so badly, figuring the place was occupied by either squatters or critters, when they cut me off swearing that the place was haunted. I asked them how they figured that, and they replied something to the effect of, "It plays all on its own." As I said when starting this whole thing off, it wasn't and still ain't my first rodeo. Hysterical folks are nothing new to me. I was just surprised that neither of them was injured. I told Walt to stay with the couple in the station and calm them down as I took the trail in hopes of verifying their story. He agreed. Neither of us expected any kind of danger, or ghosts for that matter, way out there in the middle of nowhere, especially considering that I always carry my .40 cal. And besides, I figured that I could have used the stretch. Unfortunately, stretch was a bit of an understatement. After all, the trail was cut off for a reason, and that reason being it was damn near treacherous. I've hiked dozens of trails, climbed plenty of mountains, and even camped in the jungles of Vietnam, but I'd be lying if I said the walk wasn't a bit of a doozy. I suppose it's my older age, especially compared to a couple of kids, who, come to find out, weren't lying after all. There really was a church way out there. I'm both surprised and not surprised at all that it was never added to the historical registry. I say that because, given the look of the place, it's clearly eligible and would make sense given the territory. However, considering all of the red tape that goes along with such a status and the lack of hands we've got on standby in our park already, the omission isn't all too shocking. At best, our survey crew did a crappy job back in the day. At worst, someone was hiding this thing. It's not on any of our maps, was never brought up prior to anybody, and for all intents and purposes, doesn't exist. Yet, there it was. The view would have been damn well picturesque, if not for the awfully deteriorated state the church was left in. Still, it was a sight to behold. A tiny little brown chapel offset against a semicircle of forest green that stretched up to the sky, the aforementioned clearing of silver spruce. It looked as if it were a church made out of Lincoln logs, just about. Lincoln logs, mind you, from over 100 years ago, complete with all the aging and splitters to go along with such a stretch of time. As I approached it, sun just beginning to set, I got that feeling again. The feeling from Pappy's basement, from Laos, from my old home. This time, however, it was much stronger, and with it came the voice of my mama from years ago. Houses of worship, she used to say, being a regular at Sunday morning mass and knowing a thing or two about such things, have always got a spirit to them. Just remember that not all of them are holy. I couldn't detect the holiness of this place, though. All I could tell was that it had certainly passed its prime, and that made the two of us. At about this point, when I was still a good 50 feet away from the place or so, trudging through the high grass, I heard a slight ringing in my ears and figured it was just me or my hearing aid. Age'll do that to you. Yet, as the building grew closer, I realized it wasn't either. It was coming from inside the church. The sound was almost like a hum, far deeper than any human voice could ever make. It was faint and nearly inaudible. Only one single tone, too. In fact, had I not been wearing my aid, I probably wouldn't have heard it at all. When I reached the two front doors of the thing and gripped its rusty handle, my whole body began to shake. Surely those kids had put some kind of idea in my head, I thought. There are no ghosts. I pulled the unlocked door, whose latch had either been busted at some point or completely eroded, open, and immediately my fear turned to sadness. There lay the church before me, complete with only a dozen or so pews in total, 6 on either side of the aisle. Stained glass that lived up to its name with all that dirt and decay, casting a mix of orange and multicolored shades onto the rickety pulpit, and a modestly sized organ in the rightmost corner, proportionate with the rest of the church's features. It was that organ, I quickly realized, that was making the noise. Then I remembered what the young couple had said. It plays all on its own. I took a series of unsteady steps down the aisle as the rotten wood creaked beneath my boots. Every few feet or so, a new cobweb would snag along the brim of my hat, and I'd have to brush it aside. Scurries along or within the walls would then follow, and I realized that my suspicions of critters making the place their new home were confirmed. Then, when I reached the pulpit and turned right, I settled my gaze on the organ. If memory serves, which it usually don't, the note pressed down along the keys was C. Just like the rest of them, the key was covered in so many layers of dust that its original white was now a brownish beige. I say that to demonstrate how there was no ghostly fingerprint in the dust, no apparition holding the key down. It was just stuck like that, as old pianos and organs often get. Something then crackled like paint beneath the single note from the key, and I lowered my eyes to the bellow pedals at the base of the instrument and studied it for a good long while. If I didn't, I might have assumed that it was just the wind or the place settling, as if it hadn't already. By watching it carefully, though, I realized that ever so slightly the pedal moved, almost impossibly slowly. It gave just enough air to the thing to keep the note playing, and when I realized this, the whole place suddenly made sense. This, I thought, staring at the aptly named instrument and feeling the hair rising on the back of my neck, was the church's lung, sucking in its final breaths, and I was witnessing it. Reminded me of Lilith all of a sudden, that old kitty, going off by herself in the backyard to die alone in peace when nobody was around to see. So, instead of taking out my digital camera and snapping away like shoving a lens into a dying old man's face, I placed my hand along the dusty organ's shelf and felt its steady vibration as it played. I thought of all the memories that must have been made between those four walls, all of the songs sung and lives lived, the Christmases, baptisms, weddings, and funerals. And now, almost poetically, I got to be there for its last one, the one for itself. I then left the place in silence, the sun having already been set. The whole hike back, that single note played continuously in my head. When I eventually reached the station a few hours ago, the couple had long since left, and only Walt was there to ask me what I'd seen. I asked him to use the computer that we had on hand, and that's when I started writing this report. Since then, Walt's asked me twice to see the place for himself, and both times I've declined. About 40 minutes ago, around 3 in the morning, he stumbled into the station holding a flashlight and sporting the same white cheeks and stringy hair as those kids had. When we met eyes, neither of us said a word, yet exchanged plenty. Finally, I asked him matter-of-factly, "Is it dead yet?" He shook his head. "Think we ought to take it out like the mule deer?" he asked. I bit my lower lip and thought about his question as I typed the rest of this out. Now, I can answer confidently. So long as we or nobody else don't go back there, I tell him. We already have.